All right, so the question is asking us to identify the type of growth pattern shown, write an expression to represent this pattern, and find the sixth um, step in this pattern. So, as usual, starting with the total number of squares in each. So, step 1 has 3 squares in total. Step 2 has 8 squares in total, and step 3 has 15 squares in total. So if we examine how our numbers are changing, the number of squares are changing. That's a plus 5. This is a plus 7. And what I'm going to do is just to go ahead and draw the fourth term in this pattern. So step 4. And just what I'm noticing so far, I have a square at the bottom and then 2 rows on top of that. So it would mean I have this is a 1 by a 3 by 1. This happens to be a 4 by 2. This is a 5 by 3. And so I'm thinking based on how these numbers are changing, this is going to be a 6 by 4. So when I draw my pattern, I should have 4 columns and 6 rows. So that's my 4 columns. And here I'm going to do my 6 rows. All right. So 6 times 4, I know that is going to give me 24 squares. And if I think about the jump from 15, how is that changing from 15 to 24? That is actually a plus 9. So what I can actually see is that even though it's not changing at a constant rate, the rate of change is changing at a constant value. That's a plus 2 each time. And what that tells me is that this is going to be representative of quadratic growth. And so if I represent this on a table, here's what we'll see, where my x represents my step number and my y represents my total number of squares in the pattern. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 is what I have now. 1 times that's going to give me 3. Step 2 has 8 squares. Step 3 has 15, and step 4 has 24. And we have noticed that it's changing, adding plus 5, then plus 7, then plus 9, and also seeing that that rate of change is changing constantly by adding a plus 2. So what do I notice about the visual in the pattern itself? Well, I notice growing squares. So my squares are on the bottom. So there's my 1 by 1. Here is my 2 by 2. Here is my 3 by 3. And in my fourth pattern, here is my 4 by 4. So constantly I'm noticing a square and then 2 rows of n at the top. So 2 squares right there. I have 2 rows of 2 by 2s right there. I have 2 rows of 3 here, and I have 2 rows of 4 here. So if I were to draw n, so before I had that, what do I notice? I notice that I'm getting n times n in the yellow portion, so that's going to be n times n. Come on, Mrs. Thomas. My yellow portion is a square n times n, and my green portion is a row of 2 sets of squares, so that is actually 2 times n. So if I were to draw step n in this pattern, this is what my step n would look like. I would have a shape that looks like this, where the bottom portion of my shape is n times n, which is equal to n squared, and the top portion of my shape is going to be 2n, and so the expression that gives the shape would be equal to n squared plus 2n, and I just want to color code it, and so hey, we have our n squared at the bottom, and we have our 2n at the top. And there you go. So that would be a quadratic because of the squared term, growing squares.